Commander Thexvar studied the holographic display in front of him with careful attention. The blue marble of the human agricultural moon called Demeter rotated slowly in the air, showing detailed information about every structure on its surface. His intelligence officers had spent 3 months gathering data on human colonies, and this one stood out for all the right reasons. New Haven Colony, his tactical officer reported. Population, 3,000. Minimal military presence. 12 security officers with basic weapons. 1 orbital defense shield that our systems can disable in minutes. Thexvar nodded slowly. The Velcrin Dominion had been watching humanity expand through this sector for years. The humans were new to space compared to most species, but they had been claiming systems at an aggressive pace. It was time to show them that the galaxy had rules, and the Velcrin enforced those rules. What do they produce? Thexvar asked. Food. Massive amounts of engineered crops and livestock. They supply 6 nearby systems with agricultural products. The tactical officer brought up images of vast fields stretching across the moon's surface. The population consists mainly of farmers, medical staff, teachers, and families. Many children. Perfect, Thexvar thought. A soft target with economic value. Capturing New Haven would demonstrate human weakness, without costing Velcrin lives. The other species in the galaxy would see that humanity could not protect its colonies. Earth would have to negotiate, giving up the resource-rich systems the Velcrin wanted. It was efficient warfare, the kind his people had practiced for centuries. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We move in 6 hours. On the surface of Demeter, Kevin Bradley was having a good day. The morning sun cast long shadows across the agricultural sectors, and the harvest projections showed they would exceed their quotas again. He stood in his small office in the colony's administrative building, reviewing supply reports and feeling grateful for his quiet life. Kevin had served in Earth's military for 15 years before taking this posting. He had seen combat, lost friends, and decided he wanted a different life. New Haven offered exactly that. A peaceful community focused on growing food and raising families. His daughter Amy was 7 now, happy and healthy, attending school with the other colony children. Administrator Bradley? His assistant poked her head through the door. Lisa Morgan is here to see you. Kevin smiled. Send her in. Lisa Morgan entered with her usual confident stride. She was the colony's security chief. A veteran like Kevin. Though she had only been on New Haven for 2 years, she managed a small team of 12 officers who mostly dealt with equipment malfunctions and the occasional medical emergency. Morning, Kevin, she said, settling into a chair. I wanted to update you on the perimeter sensors. We've been getting some strange readings the past few days. Kevin frowned. Strange how? Probably nothing. Could be solar interference or just old equipment acting up. But I wanted you to know we're checking it out. Keep me informed, Kevin said. He trusted Lisa's instincts. If she thought something was worth mentioning, he paid attention. Lisa left, and Kevin returned to his reports. He had no way of knowing that the strange sensor readings were Velcrin scout ships mapping the colony's defenses. He had no way of knowing that in 5 hours, his peaceful life would end. The attack came during the afternoon shift change. Kevin was in the agricultural sector, inspecting the new irrigation systems. When the sky turned dark, he looked up and felt his blood turn cold. Ships, dozens of them, massive and alien, dropping through the atmosphere with terrifying speed. The colony's alarm system started screaming. Kevin's communicator erupted with panicked voices. He started running toward the administrative center, his military training kicking in even after years of peaceful farming. All security personnel, report to stations. Lisa's voice cut through the chaos on the comm channel. This is not a drill. We are under attack. Kevin saw the first dropships landing in the central plaza. Alien soldiers poured out, moving with practiced efficiency. They wore armor that gleamed in the sunlight and carried weapons that hummed with energy. The Velcrin had arrived. Lisa and her 12 officers tried to mount a defense. They took positions around the administrative buildings, firing their basic weapons at the advancing aliens. But it was hopeless. The Velcrin shields absorbed the shots easily. Within minutes, Lisa's team was forced to surrender or die. She chose to keep her people alive. The entire colony was captured in less than 3 hours. The Velcrin moved through New Haven like a machine, securing every building and rounding up every person. They herded the colonists into the central plaza, separating families and establishing control with brutal efficiency. Kevin found himself standing with hundreds of other adults, watching as the children were taken to a separate area. He could see Amy in the crowd, scared, but not crying. She caught his eye and he tried to smile at her. Tried to show her it would be okay, even though he had no idea if that was true. Commander Thexvar's ship landed in the plaza. He emerged, flanked by guards, and surveyed his prize with satisfaction. 0 Velcrin casualties. Complete control of a human colony. Perfect. He activated a communication device and began recording a message. His words would be broadcast across all human space. A demonstration of Velcrin power and human weakness. I am Commander Thexvar of the Velcrin Dominion. New Haven Colony is now under our control. 3,000 human lives are in our custody. He gestured at the gathered colonists. This colony now belongs to the Velcrin. Your expansion into this sector is over. Earth will surrender control of the following systems, or these people will face consequences. He listed 7 resource-rich systems that the Velcrin wanted. Then he ended the transmission and ordered his soldiers to begin setting up a permanent occupation force. Kevin stood in the plaza, surrounded by his fellow colonists, and watched the Velcrin establish their control. He saw Lisa being led away with her security team to a detention area. He saw teachers trying to comfort frightened children. He saw farmers and medical staff being assigned to work details, forced to continue their jobs under alien supervision. But Kevin also saw something else. He saw the faces of his people. And they were not broken. They were scared. Yes, worried for their children, absolutely. But there was something in their eyes that the Velcrin could not see, would not understand until it was too late. These were humans. They had families here. They had children here. They had built lives here with their own hands, and somewhere out in space, other humans would hear about what happened. The news reached Earth within hours. Communication relays across human space lit up with the same terrible message. New Haven had fallen, 3,000 civilians captured, children held hostage. The Velcrin were making demands. Admiral Gregory Stone was in his office at Earth Defense Command when the alert came through. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. He had fought in 3 wars and commanded fleets in a dozen critical operations. Nothing in his long career had prepared him for the rage he felt watching the Velcrin broadcast. On the screen, Commander Thexvar stood in New Haven's plaza, surrounded by human prisoners. The camera panned across frightened faces, adults trying to stay calm. Children huddled together. Stone's trained eye picked out details. The colonists were unharmed but clearly terrified. The Velcrin had separated families. Standard intimidation tactics. Then he saw her. A small girl with dark hair, standing with the other children. Amy Bradley. His niece. His brother's granddaughter. 7 years old. Stone watched the entire broadcast without moving. When it ended, he sat in silence for exactly 30 seconds. Then he activated his communicator. Get me the Colonial Defense Council. Emergency session. Now. The council convened within the hour. Representatives from every major colony and military branch gathered in the command center. The mood was tense. Everyone had seen the broadcast. Everyone knew what the Velcrin were demanding. We need to consider our options carefully, one representative said. The Velcrin have 3,000 hostages. If we respond with force, those people could die. They want 7 systems, another added. Resource-rich territories we've spent years developing. If we give in to these demands, every species in the galaxy will see us as weak, and if we don't, someone else argued, 3,000 people will pay the price. The debate continued for 10 minutes. Stone listened to every word. He heard the arguments for negotiation, for measured responses, for diplomatic solutions. All of them were reasonable. All of them made strategic sense. All of them were wrong. Stone stood up. The room fell silent. He was the most senior military officer present, and his reputation carried weight. When Admiral Gregory Stone spoke, people listened. "The Velcrin made a mistake," he said quietly. "They calculated wrong. They looked at New Haven and saw weak defenses, minimal military presence, and civilians who could not fight back. They thought they were capturing Earth's weakest colony." He paused and looked around the room. "They were wrong. New Haven is not our weakest colony. It is home to 3,000 of our people. Our farmers, our teachers, our medical staff, our children." His voice grew harder. "The Velcrin did not capture strategic assets. They captured our families. And humanity does not negotiate when someone takes our children." The room erupted with voices. Some agreed immediately. Others protested that emotion should not drive military strategy. Stone let them argue for another minute, then raised his hand for silence. "I am not suggesting we act on emotion," he said. "I am telling you what the response will be, because I know our people. Within 24 hours, every colony, every station, every vessel in human space will volunteer for this fight. You will not need to order them. You will not need to persuade them. They will come, because that is what humans do when one of our communities needs help." He was right. The first message came from the mining station Crater's Edge, located 3 systems away from Demeter. Their station commander sent a simple transmission. "We have 6 armed ore haulers ready to deploy. Tell us where to go." Within hours, more messages flooded in. The colonial militia from New Seattle offered their entire force. The corporate security fleet from Hammond Industries diverted their ships. Independent captains changed their routes and headed toward rally points. Danny Wright was hauling medical supplies from Earth to a colony near the rim when he heard about New Haven. He was 42 years old, had been flying freighters for 20 years, and had never fired a weapon in anger. He changed course immediately. His crew protested. They had a delivery contract. They could lose their jobs. The ship was not built for combat. Danny overrode them all. "We can mount weapons," he said. "We can help. That's all that matters." Across human space, the same conversation played out thousands of times. People who had never met anyone from New Haven volunteered to fight for them. It was not about strategy or resources. It was about the simple fact that humans were in danger, and other humans would help. Dr. Nicole Hayes commanded a science vessel called the Horizon. Her crew studied stellar phenomena and had no military training. When she announced they were retrofitting for combat and joining the rescue fleet, her second officer questioned her sanity. "We're scientists," he said. "What can we possibly do against a military force?" "We have the best sensor equipment in this sector," Nicole replied. "We can provide targeting data, identify weaknesses in their shields, coordinate fleet movements. We can help, so we will." Admiral Stone watched the reports come in with grim satisfaction. He had predicted this, but seeing it happen still moved him. Humanity was messy and chaotic. They argued about politics and resources and territory, but when someone needed help, all of that disappeared. The response was instant and unanimous. He began coordinating the fleet. Military vessels formed the core, but they were quickly surrounded by civilian ships of every type: freighters, mining haulers, corporate security, science vessels. Even a few luxury yachts whose owners installed weapons and volunteered as scouts. The fleet that assembled over the next 3 days was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. It had no unified command structure. Ships came from different organizations with different training and different equipment. Military doctrine said it should be a disaster, impossible to coordinate or control. But Admiral Stone understood something about humanity that no military academy taught. When humans fight for something they believe in, they do not need unified command. They coordinate naturally, instinctively, because they all know what needs to be done. On New Haven, the colonists began their 4th day of occupation. The Velcrin had established routines, guard shifts, work details, detention protocols. They believed their control was absolute. They did not notice the small acts of resistance beginning to occur. Equipment malfunctioning at critical moments. Supply shipments getting contaminated. Their soldiers feeling watched even when surveillance showed empty corridors. Lisa Morgan sat in detention with her security team. They were not allowed to communicate, but they did not need words. Hand signals, eye contact, subtle nods. They were sharing information, mapping guard patterns, identifying weaknesses. Kevin Bradley continued his administrative duties under Velcrin supervision. He filed reports, managed work schedules, and answered questions. He also watched. He learned. He memorized every detail of the occupation force, waiting for the moment when that information would matter. In the children's detention area, teacher Michelle Parker kept her young students calm. She taught them lessons, led them in quiet games, and made sure they stayed strong. She also taught them to pay attention, to remember what they saw, to be ready when the time came. The colonists were prisoners, but they were not broken. They were preparing. The occupation entered its 6th day. Commander Thexvar walked through New Haven's administrative center with confidence, reviewing reports from his officers. Everything appeared to be under control. The human prisoners were compliant. Work details continued without major incidents. Earth had not responded to his demands. But that was expected. Negotiations took time. What Thexvar did not see were the small problems accumulating across the colony. Problems that seemed random but were anything but. In the agricultural sector, irrigation systems were malfunctioning. Chris Martinez, the farm supervisor, worked on repairs under Velcrin supervision. He was a large man with weathered hands and a calm demeanor. The Velcrin guards watched him fix pumps and adjust water flow, never realizing that certain pipes were now directed toward their supply depot. "This system is old," Chris explained to his guard. "Breaks down all the time. I'll have it fixed soon." The guard nodded and moved on. By evening, the supply depot had 3 inches of water flooding through it. Food containers were contaminated. Equipment was damaged. The Velcrin blamed poor maintenance, never suspecting sabotage. In the medical center, Dr. Brandon Cole treated injured Velcrin soldiers with perfect professionalism. He was 45 years old, had practiced medicine for 20 years, and had taken an oath to help anyone who needed it. He kept that oath, treating every patient with care. He also took detailed notes. Velcrin biology, reaction times, weaknesses in their armor joints, medical vulnerabilities, information that might be useful later. The Velcrin saw a cooperative doctor. They did not see an intelligence officer gathering data. Michelle Parker kept the colony's children occupied in their detention area. She was 32 years old, had been teaching for a decade, and loved every one of her students like they were her own. She led them in educational games and quiet activities, keeping their spirits up despite the frightening situation. She also taught them to observe, to memorize guard shift changes, to notice which doors were locked and which were not, to understand the daily routines of their captors. The children thought it was a game. Michelle knew it was preparation. The colonists were not staging a rebellion. They knew they could not win a direct fight. But they were doing something more subtle and more dangerous. They were undermining the occupation from within, creating chaos that looked like accidents, preparing for the moment when help arrived, because every single colonist believed help was coming. Lisa Morgan sat in the detention center with her 11 remaining officers. One had been injured during the initial attack and was recovering in the medical center. The rest were here, under constant guard. They were not allowed to talk, but they communicated anyway. A tap on the wall. Morse code. Ancient but effective. Lisa sent messages to her team, sharing observations about guard patterns. They responded with information about structural weaknesses they had noticed. Slowly, carefully, they built a complete picture of the occupation force. The Velcrin guards saw prisoners sitting quietly. They had no idea detailed intelligence was being compiled right under their watch. On the 7th day, a Velcrin intelligence officer named Drev Khan decided to interrogate Kevin Bradley. He wanted to understand human military capabilities, learn about Earth's defenses, gather information that might be useful in future conflicts. Kevin was brought to a small office in the administrative building. Drev Khan sat across from him, his translator device converting his words into human language. "You served in Earth's military," Drevkan said. It was not a question. They had accessed colony records. "I did," Kevin answered calmly. 15 years. Then I retired to farm. "Tell me about Earth's fleet strength." Kevin shrugged. "I left the military 8 years ago. My information would be outdated." Drevkan studied him. The human showed no signs of stress. No fear. No anger. Just calm acceptance of his situation. It was unusual. "Your colony was easy to capture," Drevkan said. "Minimal defenses. No military presence. Earth sent you here unprotected." "New Haven is an agricultural colony," Kevin replied. "We grow food. We don't need heavy weapons to farm. Yet you chose to live here. You, a military veteran. Why leave Earth's protection for a vulnerable outpost?" Kevin smiled slightly. "I wanted a quiet life. Wanted to raise my daughter in peace. New Haven offered that, and now your daughter is a prisoner." Drevkan pointed out. "Does that not make you angry?" "Of course it does," Kevin said simply. "Yet you remain calm. You work. You cooperate. You do not resist." Kevin leaned forward slightly. "Let me explain something about humans. We're practical people. My daughter and 3,000 others are being held by a military force we cannot fight. Resistance right now would be suicide. So we cooperate. We wait. And we trust that our people will come for us." Drevkan made a sound that might have been laughter. "You believe Earth will send a rescue force? For one agricultural colony? 6. I know they will," Kevin said with absolute certainty. "Why? Your colony has no strategic value. The cost of mounting a military operation to retake it would far exceed any benefit. Your Earth leadership will negotiate instead." Kevin shook his head slowly. "You're thinking about this wrong. You're calculating strategic value, weighing costs against benefits. That's not how humans work when it comes to our people." "Then how do you work?" "New Haven has 3,000 people, families, children. Every one of them is connected to someone else out there. My daughter has an uncle who serves in the fleet. Lisa Morgan, our security chief, has 2 brothers in the Colonial Marines. Chris Martinez's wife commands a mining station. We're all connected. We're all family in one way or another." Kevin paused, making sure Drevkan was listening carefully. "You didn't capture a weak colony. You took hostages from 3,000 families spread across human space. And when you threaten families, when you take children, humans don't calculate value. They respond, every single one of them." Drevkan considered this. "That seems inefficient. Emotional. Not strategic." "Maybe," Kevin agreed. "But that's who we are. You chose New Haven because it looked weak. You thought minimal defenses meant an easy target. You were wrong. New Haven isn't weak. We just chose to use our resources to grow food instead of building weapons. But the strength of our colony doesn't come from what we have here. It comes from what every other human will do when we need help." The intelligence officer stood up. "Your faith in your people is admirable but misplaced. Earth will negotiate. They will surrender systems to get you back. That is the logical choice." Kevin just smiled. "You'll see." Drevkan left the interrogation convinced the human prisoners were delusional, clinging to hope that would not materialize. He reported to Commander Thexvar that the colonists showed no useful intelligence value and recommended simply maintaining the occupation until Earth responded to their demands. Thexvar agreed. His fleet remained in orbit. His troops maintained surface control. He prepared another message to Earth, increasing his demands. Now that a week had passed without response, he believed his strategy was working perfectly. Then, on the 8th day, sensors detected something. The tactical officer called Thexvar to the bridge with urgent tone in his voice. "Commander, we have incoming hyperspace signatures." "How many?" Thexvar asked, expecting a small diplomatic vessel. 347, the officer replied. "And counting." Thexvar stared at the display. Ships were emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the Demeter system. Military vessels, corporate security, freighters, mining haulers, science ships, a chaotic mix that should not work together but was moving with unified purpose toward New Haven. Battle stations, Thexvar ordered. His confidence wavered slightly, but he still believed in his advantage. His fleet had 42 military warships, purpose-built for combat. The human force was larger but undisciplined, a mixture of ship types and capabilities. He could win this. Then a transmission came through on every channel. A human voice, Co-Commander Thexvar, had 1 hour to make a decision. His tactical display showed the human fleet approaching in what should have been a chaotic mess. Military doctrine said that mixed force operations were nearly impossible to coordinate. Different ship types, different capabilities, different command structures. It should fall apart under pressure. But the humans were not following military doctrine. Analysis, Thexvar demanded. His tactical officer worked quickly. They have organized into layers. Military warships form a protective screen at the front. Behind them, corporate security vessels provide supporting fire. The civilian ships, freighters and miners, are holding back but still armed. Science vessels appear to be coordinating sensor data across the entire fleet. How is that possible? Thexvar asked. They have no unified command structure. Unknown, Commander. But they are acting with surprising coordination. Thexvar studied the display. His 42 warships were outnumbered, but they were purpose-built military vessels with trained crews. The human force was mostly improvised. He could win this fight. The cost would be high, but victory was achievable. He chose to engage. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for generations. It began conventionally enough. Velcrin warships moved into formation, preparing to meet the human military screen. Weapons charged, shields activated. Both sides positioned for optimal firing solutions. Then Admiral Stone gave an order that shattered all conventional tactics. All civilian vessels, you are free to engage at will. Choose your targets and prosecute with extreme prejudice. Military screen will provide cover. The human fleet exploded into motion. Freighters and mining vessels broke formation and accelerated toward Velcrin positions. The military warships did not advance in neat lines, but instead created gaps, allowing civilian ships to pass through. Danny Wright piloted his freighter Liberty's Call directly at a Velcrin cruiser. His cargo hold had been converted into a weapons platform, mounting industrial cutting lasers designed for salvage work. They were not military grade, but at close range, they did not need to be. All power to forward shields, Danny ordered his crew. Ram speed. His second officer protested. Captain, we'll be destroyed. Then make sure you're in the escape pods before impact, Danny replied calmly. The Velcrin cruiser fired on the approaching freighter. Shots slammed into Danny's shields, draining them rapidly. Alerts screamed across his bridge. Hull integrity failing. Life support compromised. Any sane captain would have pulled back. Danny increased speed. The collision tore through both ships. The freighter's reinforced cargo section smashed into the cruiser's hull, breaching multiple compartments. Danny's crew evacuated in the final seconds before impact. The freighter was destroyed, but the Velcrin cruiser was crippled, venting atmosphere and listing helplessly. Across the battle space, similar scenes played out. Human captains fought with a ferocity that defied calculation. They accepted damage that should have forced retreat. They used their ships as weapons when conventional attacks failed. They protected each other with selfless coordination that no military training could teach. The mining haulers from Crater's Edge formed a tight formation and targeted a Velcrin destroyer. Their industrial lasers, designed to cut through asteroids, focused fire on a single point in the destroyer's shields. The concentrated power punched through, and the following volley carved deep into the ship's hull. Dr. Nicole Hayes commanded the science vessel Horizon from a position behind the main battle line. Her ship had minimal weapons, but her sensor arrays were the most advanced in the fleet. She identified weaknesses in Velcrin shield harmonics and broadcast targeting data to every human ship. Velcrin shields rotate frequency every 45 seconds, she transmitted. I'm sending you the pattern. Time your shots for maximum penetration. Human gunners adjusted their fire patterns. Shots that had been deflected now punched through. Velcrin casualties increased rapidly. On the surface of New Haven, the colonists heard the battle raging in orbit. Kevin Bradley stood in the administrative center, listening to the distant sounds of explosions in space. The Velcrin guards around him were clearly nervous, receiving urgent messages from their commanders. Then Chris Martinez's modifications to the irrigation system finally paid off. The flooding in the Velcrin supply depot reached critical levels. Electrical systems short-circuited. Backup generators failed. Half the surface installations lost power. In the medical center, Dr. Brandon Cole released the mild sedative he had been preparing for days. It was not enough to knock anyone unconscious, just enough to slow reaction times and cloud judgment. The Velcrin guards in the medical wing suddenly felt drowsy and confused. Michelle Parker led the children through maintenance tunnels she had memorized from colony blueprints. The Velcrin had never bothered to secure these passages because they seemed too small and complex to matter. Michelle knew every turn, every access point. She brought the children to a secured section of the colony and sealed the doors behind them. Lisa Morgan gave the signal. Her security team moved simultaneously. They had been planning this for 8 days. Watching. Learning. Waiting. Now they acted with practiced precision. The drowsy guards in the detention center were overwhelmed before they could raise an alarm. Within minutes, Lisa's team was armed and moving to secure critical sections of the colony. The colonists were not trying to defeat the occupation force. They were creating chaos, thinning the defenses, preparing for the moment when rescue arrived. They were doing what they had always done best, working together toward a common goal. In orbit, Commander Thexvar watched his fleet crumble. 9 ships destroyed, 14 more damaged and barely operational. His tactical advantage had evaporated in less than an hour. The humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. They did not retreat when damaged. They did not hesitate when facing superior firepower. They simply kept coming, wave after wave, with a determination that bordered on madness. "Commander, we must withdraw," his tactical officer urged. "We cannot hold this position." Thexvar wanted to disagree, wanted to find a way to turn the battle. But his training overrode his pride. He was losing. Continuing to fight meant total destruction. "All ships, begin retreat to hyperspace coordinates," he ordered. "Surface forces, prepare for emergency evacuation." On New Haven's surface, the Velcrin soldiers received their orders: abandon equipment, leave supplies, get to the transport ships immediately. The occupation was over, but Admiral Stone was not done. His voice cut through every communication channel again. "Velcrin forces, you will surrender or you will be destroyed. Ground troops will lay down weapons and submit to detention. Fleeing ships will be pursued and engaged. You came to take our people. Now you will answer for that choice." 3 Velcrin ships attempted to break for hyperspace. Human fighters pursued them to the edge of the system, inflicting heavy damage before they escaped. The remaining Velcrin fleet formed a defensive cluster around their troop transports, trying to cover the evacuation of surface forces. Admiral Stone's military screen moved in. The fighting was brutal and short. Velcrin ships, already damaged and demoralized, began surrendering. Captains who refused were destroyed. Within 2 hours of the initial engagement, the orbital battle was over. Velcrin. Control of the space around New Haven had been shattered completely. On the surface, Velcrin ground forces attempted to reach their transport ships, but the colonists had other ideas. Power outages blocked key routes. Flooded passages forced detours. Armed security teams cut off access to landing zones. The Velcrin evacuation descended into chaos. Kevin Bradley watched Velcrin soldiers abandon their posts and run for their ships. He walked calmly to the communications center and activated the colony-wide system. "All colonists, move to designated safe zones. Stay away from Velcrin evacuation routes. Help is landing in 10 minutes." Human transport ships descended through the atmosphere, covered by. The sun rose over New Haven on the 9th day, casting light on a colony that had been through war and emerged battered but unbroken. The central plaza, where Velcrin forces had herded prisoners just days before, now served as a coordination center for recovery operations. Human soldiers worked alongside colonists to restore power, clear debris, and account for every person. Admiral Gregory Stone stood in the administrative building, reviewing casualty reports. The battle had cost lives. 3 freighters destroyed. 2 military corvettes heavily damaged. Fighter losses. Ground team injuries. The price of liberation had been paid in blood, but it had been paid willingly. Kevin Bradley entered the office. He looked tired but steady. 8 days of occupation followed by a chaotic liberation would exhaust anyone, but he was already working on restoration plans. "Admiral," Kevin said, "I wanted to thank you personally." Stone nodded. "Your people did well. The resistance you organized probably saved lives. Made our job easier. We just did what we could," Kevin replied. "But I need to tell you something. When the Velcrin interrogated me, they asked why I thought Earth would send a rescue force for an agricultural colony. They said it didn't make strategic sense." "What did you tell them?" "I told them they were calculating wrong. That humans don't measure the value of a fight by strategic importance. We measure it by who needs protecting." Stone smiled slightly. "You were right. Every ship that came here volunteered. I didn't order them. I didn't need to. They came because that's what humans do." "How many did we lose?" Kevin asked quietly. 43 dead, 78 wounded seriously enough to need extended medical care. Most of those were from the civilian vessels. Stone's voice was heavy. "Danny Wright, the freighter captain who rammed that cruiser. His crew got out, but he stayed too long making sure everyone evacuated. He didn't make it." Kevin closed his eyes. "I didn't know him." "Neither did I," Stone said. "But he knew about New Haven. About your daughter and the other children here. That was enough for him to give his life." Understand. They stood in silence for a moment, honoring a man who had died for people he never met. "What happens now?" Kevin asked. "Now we make sure this never happens again," Stone replied. Across the colony, reunions continued. Lisa Morgan found her security team and hugged each one. They had all survived, though 2 were injured. She immediately began organizing them to help with recovery efforts, because that was what they did. They protected their community. Chris Martinez returned to the agricultural sectors to assess damage. The flooding he had caused had ruined some equipment, but the fields were mostly intact. Within weeks, they could resume food production. He stood in the morning light, looking at the crops he had spent years nurturing, and felt grateful to be alive to see them grow. Dr. Brandon Cole worked in the medical center, treating injured colonists, and even some captured Velcrin soldiers. His oath to help anyone who needed it remained unbroken. He provided the same level of care to everyone, regardless of which side they had fought on. Several Velcrin soldiers, confused by this treatment, asked why he would help his enemies. "Because you're injured," Brandon replied simply. "That's all that matters right now." Michelle Parker gathered her students in a classroom that had been hastily repaired. The children were shaken by their experience but resilient. She led them through gentle activities, helping them process what had happened while reassuring them they were safe now. Several parents joined her, and together they worked to restore normalcy for the youngest survivors of the occupation. In orbit, repair crews worked on damaged ships while others prepared to return home. The volunteer fleet that had assembled so quickly was now beginning to disperse. Their mission was complete. New Haven was free, but the impact of what happened was only beginning to spread. Within days, every species in the galaxy heard about the Battle of Demeter. The story was remarkable not for the military tactics or the final outcome, but for what it revealed about humanity. A species that would mobilize hundreds of ships to rescue an agricultural colony. A species where freighter captains would ram military cruisers to protect people they had never met. A species that measured the value of a fight, not by resources or territory, but by the people who needed help. The Velcrin Dominion withdrew from all borders with human space. Commander Thexvar faced a military tribunal for his strategic failure. He tried to explain that his calculations had been correct, that New Haven should have been an easy target. The tribunal did not care about his calculations. He had started a war the Velkrin could not win, not because of military strength, but because he had fundamentally misunderstood his enemy. Other species studied the human response carefully. They noted that humanity's reaction had been immediate and overwhelming. They observed that the volunteer fleet had included civilians who transformed their ships into weapons. They understood that conventional strategic planning against humanity was nearly impossible, because humans did not think about strategy the way other species did. Dr. Nicole Hayes published a detailed analysis of the Velkrin's failure. She had been invited to present her findings at the Galactic Strategic Institute, where military leaders from dozens of species gathered to learn from the conflict. The Velkrin made a simple mistake, she explained to the assembled audience. They chose New Haven because it appeared weak. Minimal defenses, no military presence, civilian population. By every conventional measure, it was the perfect target. She brought up images of the colony before the attack. But the Velkrin were measuring the wrong things. They counted weapons and shields and soldiers. They did not count the 3,000 families connected to New Haven. They did not count the millions of humans across space who would see that colony's capture as a threat to all of humanity. They calculated strategic value when they should have been calculating emotional response. A delegate from another species raised a question. But surely, emotion is a weakness in military planning. Clear strategic thinking should triumph over emotional reaction. Nicole smiled. That's what the Velkrin thought too. But what looks like emotional response is actually humanity's greatest strength. When any human community is threatened, the response is not calculated or measured. It is immediate and total. Every human becomes personally invested. That makes our territory impossible to hold, because taking any part of it means fighting all of us. That seems inefficient, another delegate observed, defending every location with maximum force regardless of strategic value. Maybe, Nicole agreed. But it means humanity has no weak points. Because every point is defended by the whole species. The Velkrin thought they were being smart by targeting our weakest colony. Instead, they discovered that we don't have weak colonies. We only have colonies where fewer people happen to be soldiers. The analysis spread through military academies across the galaxy. New strategic doctrine was written, warning against engaging human territories unless prepared for total war, not because humanity was the most powerful species, but because they were the most unpredictable. They would fight for things that had no strategic value. They would sacrifice resources to protect people. They made decisions based on factors that could not be calculated or predicted. On New Haven, life slowly returned to normal. The colony received upgraded defensive systems, not because they asked for them, but because the rest of humanity wanted their agricultural moon protected. Kevin Bradley continued his work as administrator, though he was uncomfortable with the attention the colony now received. News crews wanted interviews. Military historians wanted to document the occupation. Political leaders wanted to visit. He declined most requests. New Haven was not a symbol or a lesson. It was home to 3,000 people who wanted to get back to their lives. Admiral Stone returned to Earth and faced questions from the Colonial Council about the scale of the response. Some council members worried that the precedent was dangerous. If humanity responded with overwhelming force to every threat, they would be in constant conflict. Stone listened to their concerns and then provided his response. The Velkrin taught us something important, he said. Not about military tactics or fleet coordination, but about who we are as a species. When they captured New Haven, every human in space had the same reaction. Not because we were ordered to respond. Not because of strategic calculations. But because 3,000 of our people needed help. He paused and looked around the council chamber. That response is not something we should try to control or measure. It is what makes us human. It is what ensures that no colony, no matter how small or remote, will ever be truly vulnerable. Because every colony is connected to all of humanity. Threaten one, and you threaten all of us. The Velkrin learned that lesson. So did every other species watching. The Council approved increased colonial defense funding but also recognized that true security came not from weapons or shields, but from the certainty that humanity would always respond when their people needed help. 6 months after liberation, New Haven held a memorial ceremony. They built a monument in the central plaza, listing the names of everyone who died in the rescue fleet. 43 names. 43 people who gave their lives for a colony most of them had never visited. Kevin Bradley stood with his daughter Amy at the memorial. She was 8 now, still recovering from the trauma of occupation but growing stronger each day. "Dad," she asked, "did all these people die to save us?" "Yes," Kevin said honestly, "but they didn't know us." "No, they didn't." Amy thought about this for a moment. "Then why did they come?" Kevin knelt down to her level. "Because you needed help. That's all that mattered to them. They came because humans help other humans. That's who we are, even when we're far away, even when we're just a farm." "Especially then," Kevin said. "New Haven is not just a farm. It's home to 3,000 people. And those people are worth everything to the rest of humanity." Amy looked at the names on the memorial. 43 strangers who became heroes. She did not fully understand yet, but someday she would. Someday she would know that she lived in a species that valued people over strategy, that measured strength not in weapons but in willingness to help, that would cross the galaxy to protect their own. The sun set over New Haven, casting long shadows across the restored fields. The colony continued its work, growing food for nearby systems, raising families, living peaceful lives. But everyone who lived there now carried a truth that the Velcrin had learned the hard way. They were not Earth's weakest colony. They were humanity's children. And humanity would always come for their children, no matter the cost, no matter the distance, no matter what stood in the way. The Velcrin had captured what they thought was an easy target. Instead, they had faced the unbroken fury of an entire species. And they had learned that when you take something from humanity, you do not get to keep it. You only get to learn why you should never have tried. Fighter escorts. They landed in secure zones, and Earth soldiers poured out, not to fight, but to help. They moved through the colony, ensuring colonists were safe, providing medical attention, securing critical facilities. Admiral Stone's personal transport landed in the central plaza. He stepped out, looking across the colony he had come so far to liberate. Velcrin soldiers were being rounded up and detained. Colonists were emerging from shelters, dazed but alive. Then he saw Amy. She ran across the plaza, followed by Michelle Parker and the other children. Kevin caught his daughter and held her tight. Stone watched the reunion for exactly 30 seconds. Then he went back to work. There was still a battle to finish. The last Velcrin transport ships lifted off under heavy fire. Most of them made it to orbit. A few did not. The remaining Velcrin fleet, battered and broken, jumped to hyperspace. Commander Thexvar's flagship was among them, barely functional but escaping. The battle for New Haven was over. It had lasted 6 hours, from first engagement to final evacuation. The Velcrin had held the colony for 8 days. It took humanity 6 hours to take it back. LD and hard. This is Admiral Gregory Stone of Earth Defense Command. You are occupying human territory and holding human civilians prisoner. You have 1 hour to release all prisoners and withdraw your forces from New Haven. After 1 hour, any Velcrin vessel or soldier remaining in this system will be considered hostile and destroyed. There will be no negotiation. There will be no compromise. Return our people and leave, or face the consequences. The transmission ended. Thexvar looked at his tactical display and realized with growing dread that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not coming to negotiate. They were coming to take back their colony by force. Every single ship in that approaching fleet was armed and moving into attack formation. On the surface of New Haven, the colonists heard the transmission. Kevin Bradley smiled. Lisa Morgan gave a subtle signal to her team. Chris Martinez adjusted one more water valve. Michelle Parker quietly told the children to be ready to move soon. The Velcrin guards looked nervous. They could hear the concern in their commanders' voices over the communication channels. Something had changed. The occupation was no longer secure. Help had arrived. and humanity's fury was about to be unleashed. Commander Thexvar received reports of the human fleet assembling near their borders. His intelligence officers assured him it was defensive positioning, a show of force meant to support negotiations. He agreed. The fleet was large but chaotic. It would take weeks to organize into an effective fighting force. He had no idea they were already in hyperspace. He had no idea they were coming to New Haven. He had no idea that Admiral Stone's fleet would arrive in less than 36 hours. And when they did, they would not be coming to negotiate. They were coming to take back their people. And they were bringing the fury of an entire species with them, and to New Haven. Kevin looked up at the alien ships in orbit and thought about something his old commander used to say. You can capture ground. You can take territory. You can even round up people and put them in detention areas. But you cannot capture the human spirit. You cannot hold what matters most. And when you try, when you threaten families and children, you do not get compliance. You get fury. Commander Thexvar stood in the plaza, believing he had won an easy victory. He had no idea what was coming. He had no idea that he had just made the worst strategic mistake in Velcrin history. He did not understand that he had not captured Earth's weakest colony. He had taken Earth's children, and humanity was about to show him exactly what that meant.